So, GBA fans, it's Xilicks here, and welcome to our Week 4 preview. We're going to be going over all of the matches coming up this week, looking at which team has an advantage, who has an edge, and what we think about each of the matchups. I am joined here with...
What's going on, GBA fans? My name is Monatui.
And together, we will be breaking these battles down. But first, we're going to take a look at the schedule to see who is traveling where and which teams are facing off against one another. Our first home team is the Bullet Punch Club. Currently the only team that is still holding on to an undefeated status, a massive accomplishment. And they are going off against the San Diego Snugglers that are traveling over to them. They are coming off a loss with the record being a 1-2 right now, obviously looking to change that and put a stop to the momentum that the Bullet Punch Club has created. Our next matchup, we have the home team of the Borussia Donphan facing off against the New York Empoleon. Gonna have to get on the plane and travel a distance to get there, but when they do, we are going to be looking at a battle where both coaches are coming off a loss with a 1-2 record. Gonna be a good one to watch to see who is able to change that streak. Moving on, we have the Wolverhampton Weaviles traveling to the Chicago Dragapults. The Dragapults coming off a win with a 1-2 record, while the Wolverhampton Weaviles are coming off a loss from last week, currently with a 2-1 record. Both teams really looking to change their fate a bit here. Obviously, the Weaviles are not wanting another loss, and if the Dragapults are able to pull off a victory this week, it would start to turn their current record around for the better. Next up, we have the home team of the Copenhagen Sawsbucks, currently the only team in the league without a win. Traveling to Copenhagen, we have the Calgary Flamethrowers, 1-2, also coming off a loss. Both teams are in a bit of a dark spell at the moment, and obviously the Sawsbucks are desperately searching for that first win. The Flamethrowers are in a position where they don't want to keep losing, so this is also going to be another important match to keep an eye on moving into Week 4. For our next team, we have the home team of the San Francisco Arcaniners coming off a W versus the Atlanta Victinis that are traveling coast to coast to face off against those Arcaniners, also coming off a win, 2-1. Arcaniners got their first win last week, and the Atlanta Victinis were able to shut down a team that had not lost yet. So both teams are on a bit of a high. We will see who carries that momentum into Week 4. And finally, we have the home team of Playmore Esports versus the Edmonton Coilers. Both teams 2-1 and both teams with a W from last week. They both have a good record so far, and this is another battle that is definitely worth watching, as this will, decide which of these teams is going to make the top cut and which one is going to fall slightly behind. Taking a look at our first battle, we have the Bullet Punch Club versus the San Diego Snugglers. Really, each of these teams have quite a few top threats. We're seeing the Annihilate from the Snugglers, as well as that Iron Jugulus, which can be quite scary with a booster energy. Then from the Bullet Punch Club, we have things like that Dragonite, the Golden Go, and the Masquerada, all of which can be quite good, especially in Draft League. Personally, I think in this battle we may see the Avalugg from the Bullet Punch Club come, as it can be a great counter to Palafin, one of the Snugglers' top threats, which normally has the ability to absolutely dominate some teams. Alternatively, the Bullet Punch Club could bring the Clodsire with that Water Absorb ability to nullify Palafin's strongest moves. A late game Iron Jugulus from the Snugglers with a speed booster energy can be quite dangerous to the Bullet Punch Club's team if the Snugglers are able to deal with some of those priority users earlier in the game. Because the Bullet Punch Club, true to their name, they have some of the best priority options in the entire draft. and those options are quite effective against the Snugglers offense, having things like the extreme speed for the Palafin, or Lycanroc's ability to resist an extreme speed from Arcanine, firing back with powerful rock moves, the ability for Lycanroc to go for an Accelerock against the Iron Jugulus to prevent a late game sweep is also going to be invaluable to have. That being said, the Dragonite, being one of the biggest mons here, can always cause some trouble having access to that Terra Normal extreme speed. The Annihilate, however, is quite a good counter. It can switch into the Dragonite, ignoring an extreme speed. It has the ability to Terrastallize into the Fairy type if the Dragonite is going for those Dragon type moves, or it can stay as a Ghost type, Terrastallize into Pure Ghost, getting rid of that fighting to ignore a flying weakness that the Dragonite could threaten it with. But the Bullet Punch Club does have the Clodsire, which can shut down Annihilate's attempts to set up bulk ups with its Unaware ability or access to the move Haze. We could also see the Meowscarada using its ability to spam Flower Trick, ignoring any defense boosts that we may see from an Annihilate bulk up or even a Palafin bulk up. All around though, I think this game could go either way. I do think the Bullet Punch Club does have a slight advantage, as I think defensively their team can handle the threats that the San Diego Snugglers bring to the table, but we will have to see. Will Bullet Punch Club keep their winning streak, or will they lose it here?
Alright, so let's get into the matchup between the Copenhagen Sawsbucks and the Calgary Flamethrowers. So Frosted, aka the Copenhagen Sawsbucks, will be hosting this match. For Frosted side, you have Iron Bundle, Landorus Therian, Hydreigon, which is a Terra Captain, Hisuian Zoroark, Hisuian Lilligant, Slowbro, Talonflame, Hisuian Quillfish, Diancie, Magnezone, and Hisuian Avalugg. Whereas on the Calgary Flamethrower side, you have Baxcalibur, Ursaluna, Grimmsnarl, Slowking, Quaquaval, Sylveon, Hisuian Electrode, Colossal, Orthworm, Salazzle, and Ice-Cube. So, immediately looking at this matchup, it's nice to see that the Flamethrowers do have a decent counter to Iron Bundle, being that Orthworm, if it's especially defensive, will be able to resist both of Iron Bundle's stabs. Also can be a nice little switch into Landorus T's Earthquake. It's a pretty versatile Bulkmon this game, for sure. That's definitely going to be something for Frosted to look out for. However, on Frosted side, something that can definitely cause a lot of damage is going to be something along the lines of that Ursaluna. It's very, very powerful. Even something like Slowbro does not want to switch into a Guts-boosted Facade. Granted, Slowbro will be able to live one hit, but that's really the only thing that wants to kind of take a hit from it. Potentially the Hisuian Avalugg, but even then, depending on the set, it's going to be very difficult to switch into. Also a very, very big fan of the Hydreigon against the Flamethrowers team. Potentially with Terra, may be able to deal with everything that is not the fairies on his team. You know, everything aside from the Grimmsnarl and Sylveon. And even then, maybe with Terra, it'll be able to punch a hole through it. But
moving right along to the next matchup, we have the Chicago Dragapults versus the Wolverhampton Weaviles. The home team here has one of the best Draft League dragons in Dragapult, which can certainly prove problematic, as well as the Iron Moth as a Terra Mon, which does face off nicely against both Terra options that the Weaviles have access to, although it will require some foresight on the side of the Dragapults to choose the correct type, as both Fire or Grass can prove incredibly useful here. Personally, I would expect that we see the Grass Terra type to be brought, as it can allow for the Iron Moth to better handle things like the Great Tusk and the Walking Wake a little bit better, but we will have to see. our away team has a very explosive team, with several Paradox Pokemon on the roster able to use those booster energies, instantly creating a threat on the battlefield with a very good defensive backbone to carry those threats along, like the Great Tusk, the Screamtail, and the Rotom Heat, all of which can be very bulky and valuable to this matchup, as well as that Bisharp holding in a Violite is a defensive option that is not to be slept on. The pure power of Wolverhampton's roster may overwhelm Chicago in this matchup. I do not see too many reliable switch-ins to a Walking Wake, aside from maybe an Assault Vest Iron Hands, but Walking Wake has the ability to have another mode, being that Dragon Dance, allowing it to be a physical threat. The Dragapults better prepare for both options, as they do have the ability to get revenge kills with the Dragapult, but they might have to sacrifice a lot of mons to do so. Iron Moth can also be a great revenge killer in this matchup. Hopefully those offensive threats are able to force out the strong, powerful mons that the Wolverhampton Weaviles are bringing. Doing so could secure them the victory, but if they are not able to maintain that momentum, the Weaviles may have this matchup.
Moving on, we have the matchup between the San Francisco Arcaniners and the Atlanta Victini. And right away, first thing I notice, Chi-Yu, Volcarona, extremely difficult for the Victinis to handle. There's very, very little that really wants to deal with it. Dragalge is maybe the best option for it, outside of, I don't know, Glimmet, if you decide to bring a Glimmet as your switch into those things, but realistically, I'm thinking more Dragalge, and even then, that's a very, very difficult, it's not like it's going to want to take too many hits from the Chi-Yu, with that being said, and even Volcarona, depending on the set that Dragalge is, Volcarona may just be able to set up on it, so that's something to definitely keep in mind. However, on the Victini side, looking at it right away, the Urshifu Rapid Strike is looking like a threat. He does have that Gyarados that resists both of its stabs and has Intimidate, and he does have the Rillaboom that can potentially take hits from it, but depending on the set, neither of those can be reliable switch-ins. If it's a setup set, it can cause some problems. Depending on the damage it does to those two, it can potentially clean sweep through the team. Also not the easiest for George to revenge kill. He has things like the, like the Regieleki, and things like the, potentially the Rotom if it's Scarfed, or maybe the Hawlucha, but if they take enough chip damage, they could be at risk of dying to an Aqua Jet. So definitely some things to keep an eye out for. I'm a big fan of this matchup. Looking forward to the match.
Taking a look at our next battle, we have the home team of the Borussia Donphan facing off against the New York Empoleon. Both teams are bringing some good threats to the table. From Borussia, we see the Enamorus, which, if it has the ability to set up, can prove to be a deadly instrument, while the Volcanion is quite good both offensively and defensively, being able to easily switch into one of the Empoleon's top threats, Greninja. I also think the Ceruledge from the New York Empoleons will be quite good here, especially with its terrestrializing type, being able to rid itself of the fire typing, which allows it to fare better defensively against things like that Volcanion or the Iron Treads, but they will need to be careful, as that terrestrialize could potentially make them more vulnerable to the Enamorus, which, again, if it gets to set up, can prove to be a real danger to the Empoleon's team. Potentially having to maintain that sturdy on the Fortress, so Fortress could come into a setup Enamorus, survive any hit, and then retaliate with a Gyro Ball. So the Empoleons won't immediately crumble in front of a setup Enamorus if they're able to maintain that sturdy, something that Borussia may likely focus on trying to break at some point in the battle before setting up. I also think the Empoleons have quite a lot of utility that they could bring to this battle, with the Mew and the Zapdos, as well as the Overqwil, each bringing unique tools to the table, while Borussia has the option of setting up those screens with Cresselia like they did last week, to enable some of these setup sweepers or wall breakers like the Pawmot. New York will certainly have to be careful playing around screens, which have become quite common in the Scarlet and Violet metagame, and rightfully so. If New York can position their Greninja well, I suspect with the ability to U-turn and OHKO many of Borussia's team pairing with Zapdos Volt switching around, we should see New York maintain control of those screen turns if they are set up.
And next up, we have Playmore Esports going up against the Edmonton Coilers. This is one of the more interesting matchups that we have going on this week. As you can see, Playmore Esports team consists of Roaring Moon, Heatran, Glimmora, Torkoal, Slitherwing, Hisuian Samurott, Dachshund, if that's how you pronounce it, Appleton, Kilowattrel, Mismagius, and Sandaconda. Whereas the Edmonton Coilers have a roster of Iron Valiants, Galarian Slowking, Thundurus Incarnate, Tyranitar, Hisuian Goodra, Donphan, Rotomo, Farigiraf, Alamamola, Tauros, Paldea Fire version, and a Carbink. So, first thing that I want to note, Iron Valiant, terrifying Pokemon, absolutely horrifying. He does have some things to deal with it, whether it be sending Glimmora just to, have it die and set up Toxic Spikes. Does have various priority. Things like Slitherwing, Torkoal can likely take a hit, but there's really not much that wants to deal with that Iron Valiant, not even considering Terra. It's just a very, very scary Pokemon for John and company to deal with. Obviously, they do have the Dachshund as well that can potentially deal with it, but I'm not sure it's going to want to take fairy hits very, very happily. But moving on to some of Playmore Esports threats, definitely looking at that Roaring Moon. Outside of the Iron Valiant, as I mentioned, it could definitely do a lot of damage to the Coilers team. There's not really much that it wants to take a hit with. We're also noticing, as these games are playing out, that offense kind of seems to be the way to go. With things like Terra, things that used to wall Pokemon no longer wall them. So a lot of the times you kind of just want to win these games with offensive momentum. So with that in mind, I can see Playmore Esports doing things like setting up hazards and potentially being able to sweep with their faster threats. Things like Mismagius, Kilowattrel, Roaring Moon, maybe slap a Scarf on something, maybe ship things down so that Slitherwing comes in and gets a kill with first impression every time. Very interesting matchup. One more note that I want to point out on the Coilers side is be careful of Tyranitar. I don't think anything outside of potentially Roaring Moon can outspeed Tyranitar at +1, definitely not at +2. So definitely something to keep an eye out for. There's a few things on Playmore Esports team that I could see potentially losing to a setup Tyranitar.
Alright, and that will conclude our Week 4 preview. A lot of exciting matches, so you'll definitely want to make sure to check out the description where you can see all of the different coaches' channels, and you can watch these battles for yourself when they come out. My name is Xilicks. Thank you GBA fans for watching, and I will see you guys next time.